What's going on, everyone? It's Ben from YGO from Zero, back with another Critter format video, which you may find surprising as I just did my sort of wrap-up of Critter format with my Critter format tier list. But given that there is going to be a Critter format tournament on the way starting this weekend, I figured I'd extend my coverage just a little bit, cover what I think are some of the best decks in the format for any new players who are looking for something to play. Now, I've already got plenty of videos on these decks on my channel already, but I think it could still be good to sort of give a refresher for people on what I think are some of the best decks of the format, and also show some different directions that you can go with them. But before diving into the deck I've got for you today, if you enjoy this sort of content covering old formats like Critter and Yugi Kaiba, and what is soon to be the next format that I'll go into, Chaser format, which is going to be very exciting, then please be sure to subscribe. We've got just over 270 subscribers the last time I checked, and that's very exciting. I'd like to reach 300 by the end of the year, so hopefully we can do that. And of course, if you like this video, as always, please be sure to give it a like. Also, as a note, you may have noticed that I will have a face cam for this video. Some commenters were requesting that I try it out. So let me know in the comments what you think about it. Do you like the face cam? Do you find it distracting? You know, if people like it, I'll keep it around for the future. If people want it to go back to the way it was before, then I'll get rid of it. But let me know in the comments down below which you'd prefer. But anyways, now that that's out of the way, let's dive into the deck I've got for you today. So this deck is going to be Exodia, but it's going to be a slightly different build than the previous version of Exodia that I've shown off on the channel. Now, I love Exodia. It can be kind of degenerate to play because you're just stalling for a bit most of the time. But I think Critter has a very interesting form of Exodia where it's like kind of a combo deck, and that makes it very interesting and fun to play at times. Now, the previous build of this deck featured 2 copies of Magician of Faith and 2 copies of Mask of Darkness, which allowed you to recycle both powerful spells and powerful traps. However, where I think Magician of Faith is extremely good in this deck, as it can recycle very essential cards like Sword of Revealing Light, Pot of Greed, or Reborn or Last Will, potentially to get more recruiters out onto the field. I think the Mask of Darkness did a bit less in the deck. Yes, it could get you back Wabokus most of the time, which were very nice, or Solemn Judgments if you've got the game already kind of on lock. But if you have to get a Trap Hole back, that's kind of telegraphed, and same with Mirror Force, despite how powerful Mirror Force is. And also, you know, if you draw Mask of Darkness and Magician of Faith at a time when you don't really have traps or spells in the graveyard, it can be pretty bad. And that actually did come up in the tournament if you watched the tournament run that I showed off on the channel a while back. So I wanted to sort of update this deck list, take out the Masks of Darkness, and put in something else. And I actually heard of an interesting card that some other Exodia decks were playing in this tournament, which was Big Eye. And I figure Big Eye actually is slightly better in this deck than Mask of Darkness was. Which may sound surprising at first, but it kind of makes sense the more you think about it. One of the reasons why Magician of Faith is so powerful in this format is because there's so many very powerful limited spells that, you know, you've only got 1 copy of in the deck, so Magician of Faith can be additional copies that your opponent's not expecting. With traps, however, there's only 1 limited trap in Mirror Force, and getting it back with Mask of Darkness is of course extremely good, but it also is very telegraphed. If your opponent has a Heavy Storm, they can get rid of it, and there's nothing you can really do about that. And if you're getting back something like Waboku, that just buys you a turn, so it's not the most impressive thing. With Big Eye, however, you can potentially sort of shortcut yourself a couple more turns because you get to look 5 cards deeper into your deck and get the best card from that, put it on top. Also, given how much this deck is searching with things like Sangan and Witch, you can then shuffle away sort of cards that you don't want to see, and you can know when those are coming up and know when to play your recruiters or not. So Big Eye, I think, has a lot of very interesting applications in this deck. It raises the ceiling on the deck a little bit in my opinion, and that's why we're including it here instead of Mask of Darkness. In terms of the other cards in the deck, you know, it's just pretty much standard Exodia stuff. We have, of course, all the Exodia pieces, Exodia the Forbidden One, and all the arms and legs. If you get all 5 of these in your hand, you win the game. That's the main goal of this deck. We have 2 Sangan, 2 Witch. These are to search out the pieces pretty much every time, as you've got 4 recruiters in deck, 5 pieces. Generally, if you search out 4 pieces, you're going to win the game. But, if you need a bit more searching, we also have a Reborn to bring back a Recruiter to get the 5th piece. And to bring out these Recruiters, we of course have 2 Last Will. In order to facilitate the Last Will plays, we have 3 Thunder Dragon, which both thins out the deck and enables you to tribute over a Recruiter, Last Will out another Recruiter, and make insane combo plays to end the game, which is pretty awesome. It also combos well with Change of Heart, which we do also have in the deck, as it is one of the Power 5 limited spells, and it can be used to take your opponent's Magician of Faith, or man your bugs, or just powerful beaters and get in for damage if you need to. The deck does sometimes win through damage, so that is somewhat important. For the last of the monsters, we of course have 4 2K Defenders, 3 Giant Soldier of Stone, 1 Aqua Matador. I think these are very good. They can be very difficult for your opponent to get over. For the other spells, I already mentioned the Power 5 limited spells, Change of Heart, Dark Hole, Monster Reborn, Pot of Greed, and Raigeki. There is also 1 Fisher in here to act as even more removal, the 2 Last Will that I mentioned earlier, and 2 Swords Revealing Light to stall the game for even longer. This can be a great card to get back off of Magician of Faith as well, which is very nice. It can turn potentially 6 turns of stalling into 9 turns of stalling, or even more. For the traps, we of course have a Mirror Force, crazy card in this format if you can pull it off. 3 Solemn Judgment, as we don't really care as much about life points. It can come up, but we care a lot more about shutting down our opponent's stuff. This can also be incredibly important as more and more people are starting to main deck card destruction, and this is one of your only ways to stop that. I think another adjustment that could be made to Exodia in the future is potentially adding in some magic jammers and things to counter card destruction even more. But at this point in the meta, I don't think it's necessary. It'll be interesting to see if anyone experiments with that in the upcoming tournament. But we've got the 3 Solemns. We've also got 3 Trap Holes. Great at removing your opponent's monsters on their turn. Very, very nice reactive trap here. We also have 3 Huboku, which protects your monsters and your life points. Can be very, very good at preventing your opponent from OTKing you after some solemn activations and the like. For the side deck, we've got a Smokescreen side deck that's a little bit different from the previous version of the side deck that I had. And this was actually a change I made after the duels that I played, but I think it is a good change, so I just want to show it here. So we've got a Smokescreen side into a more aggro strategy, 3 Lodge In, 2 Masked Sorcerer, 1 Magician of Faith, 1 Cannon Soldier, 2 Fisher to act as even more removal, 2 Heavy Storm to clear your opponent's back row, and 1 Robin Goblin if you want to start discarding your opponent's stuff, because you are going a bit more aggro. Robin Goblin also helps up in the Exodia mirror match, so you can bring it in if you need it. And as for the main change to the side deck, previously we had 3 7-colored fish here. Change that to 3 Muka Muka. We are playing the Thunder Dragons and Last Wills in the main deck. We can keep those in, make it sort of a Muka Muka turbo shell here, and get even more aggressive, which is very nice. For the extra deck, we've just got a bunch of fusion monsters that we'll never summon, but it's for the mind games, so that's good to know for the tournament. And this is the changed Exodia deck. I think if you're planning on playing Exodia in the tournament, you can definitely use the old builds of this deck as well. Mask of Darkness can be very good in the right scenarios. I just like Big Eye in the deck a little bit more now, although it can make the games complicated, as you might see in some of these matches. But enough talking about the deck itself, let's dive into those matches. Okay, we've got a game against History of YGO1, who has been featured on the channel quite a bit. Always very fun to have them on. So let's dive into the game and see how we do. We, of course, are playing the Exodia deck, and let's hope we get some good cards in the opener. We are going first, of course, and this is actually pretty good. We've got a Witch to search out another piece. We got Mobokus, Mirror Force, Raigeki. This is actually very insane, very nice for us. We're just going to set the Witch, pass back to them, and see what they do. We're kind of bluffing that we might be on Muka Muka here, so maybe they won't be incentivized to attack. But we don't really need the Woboku or the Mirror Force here, as it's very unlikely they're going to make a huge aggressive push turn 1. So we can just set those next turn. They're going to activate Thunder Dragon, which indicates that they might also be on Exodia, in which case this is kind of rough. But it might just mean they're on a deck playing Muka Muka. So, no sort of need to worry yet, although them just setting a back row and passing is a bit worrying. Means that they likely are just on the Exodia deck. So we're just going to start getting aggressive. We're going to flip up the Witch, attack in. Main phase 2, we're going to set a Woboku, pass back to them. I think maybe we could have set the Big Eye, but I guess we're worried about like Dark Hole or something. And I guess we don't need to search the top cards of our deck just yet. I think it might have been good though. They're going to Fisher our Witch, so we will think about what we want to search here. Do we want to give away that we are on Exodia at this point? And I think since we've already got one piece in hand, and we do have the Big Eye to sort of excavate the top 5 cards of our deck and stack them how we want, I think we are just going to add a piece and see what they do. They say, oh, yep. So they do realize that we're on Exodia now. They're just going to set one pass back to us. We're just going to set the Big Eye, pass back to them. No need to play the Raigeki just yet. I mean, maybe we have the read that they've got a Magician of Faith because they didn't attack in. If that was like Sangan or Witch, they might have wanted to attack in. All they've got is a Fisher and Grave, though, so even if it is Magician of Faith, we're not too worried about that. So we don't really feel the need to do anything more. We do have the Woboku set just in case. They're going to activate Last Will, which is a bit concerning. They're going to flip up the Magician of Faith, and looks like they're going to get back the Last Will. And this is very bad, as now they'll have 2 Last Will activations, and they do have Thunder Dragon in hand. So if they're playing an aggro deck, this will allow them to get more aggro. If they're playing Exodia, you know, this allows them to get basically 2 free searches of pieces. So this is very concerning. They are going to tribute set, likely the Thunder Dragon, and then bring out 2 recruiters here. So it's very worrying. It represents 2 pieces on board. And we draw Solemn, so we might want to play that. But first we're going to flip up the Big Eye and see what we've got on the top of our deck. See if that changes anything. So let's look. We've got a Big Eye, Solemn, Swords, Last Will, Dark Hole. This is not the best, honestly. So we were really hoping for like a Recruiter or something like that to enable us to get more pieces to hand. But that's kind of worrying. We already have a Solemn. We don't really need another Big Eye yet. Dark Hole and Last will be very nice for us to get. We can potentially pull off a combo there to get another Recruiter, mix up our deck a little bit to get rid of these stinkers on top. So I think that might be what we're aiming for, just pulling off the Last Will Dark Hole play in the near future. So let's see how we stack it. This is going to be a bit tricky. So we put the Big Eye on 5th, which makes sense. Then we put the Solemn, which also makes sense. We don't need either of those. Then we put the Swords, again, makes sense. Then we put the Last Will, and it looks like we're saving the Dark Hole for last. I think that makes sense because there aren't really any ways for us to kill the Big Eye outside of the Dark Hole. And we'd prefer to have the Dark Hole first, I think. I mean, we do have Raigeki, so I don't know, but we're going to bring out Giant Soldier Stone. It looks like we're just going to start getting aggressive here with the Raigeki. I think maybe this is an error. You know, they do get 2 pieces here, and yes, they are going to get the 2 pieces off of a Dark Hole anyways, so we might as well start going for damage. But if they've got a Dark Hole or a way to clear our board, then that Last Will is not going to serve us well, and they will likely be up on pieces here. Looks like they've just got a Solemn Judgment, though, so actually that is very fine for us. We're going to pass. I think actually we should have set the Solemn, knowing that they're on Exodia. Exodia decks don't often play Heavy Storm in the main, and so we could feel somewhat safe setting the Solemn and could prevent any big plays on our opponent's part. So I think we should have set the Solemn. We don't, though, and I might come to regret that later. They're just going to switch the Witches to attack and summon out Sangan, and this is why I might come to regret it, because we could have just Solemned the Sangan summon, prevented them from getting a search that way. Might have been worth doing, because now after this, they're going to get 3 searches, which could just be the end of the game. So, you know, we're just going to let this happen as Woboku does nothing for us here. And they're just going to search out 3 pieces, and we just got to hope that it isn't enough. But this is very worrying that they're making such an aggressive push here. And they'll get another piece. And let's see what they do now. They're going to attack in again. Get another piece. Maybe we also should have kept Big Eye. Oh, we had to flip up Big Eye that turn anyway, so they would have had an attack position monster to attack into. So nothing we really could have done to prevent this other than just the Solemn Judgment. So do they have Exodia? Looks like they don't, but they do have a Reborn, which will represent a 4th search here. So Now we're in a really rough position. Again, the Solemn could have prevented one of those searches, which would have been very important, I think. And so we just should have just set it early. But nothing we can do about that now. We just got to switch our monster to defense. We'll set the Solemn now, although it doesn't really matter at this point. And they are just going to tribute set over that Sangan. Likely get the last piece to hand. We have to get very lucky in order for them not to have Exodia here. But it's extremely likely, and that will be the end of the game because they do have, I'll just show the hand, they do have Exodia. Yeah, so if we had set the Solemn earlier, I think we would have been fine here. We could have prevented the Sangan summon, and they didn't really have a good way. They had the last will, I guess, so they would have been able to reborn Sangan afterwards. Or they could have just tribute set over their Thunder Dragon, got out the last recruiter. So yeah, I think that we were just dead here either way. But it would have been better to have the Solemn online just in case. As is, you know, this can happen in an Exodia mirror match. In an Exodia mirror match, it's largely determined by who draws their combo pieces first. You know, maybe if we were up against a different deck, like Mass Control or something, we would have been fine this game, as we had a lot of defensive options here. But as is, our opponent was able to out-combo us and get the pieces. So we will go into a game 2. So game 2, we could side completely into the aggro strategy if we so wish. But I want to test out Big Eye a little bit more. And I also have to read that our opponent likely doesn't have too many outs to Exodia in their side deck. Probably just like a White Magical Hat or a Robin Goblin. And I feel like we could potentially overcome that. If they're playing Exodia on their own, then I think the side deck that we had at the time would not be the best equipped to deal with that. We do have Robin Goblin on the side, but it's kind of iffy. So I do keep it on Exodia. I do bring in the Robin Goblin over a Fisher. I side out a Fisher for the Robin, just in case they stay on Exodia. And it can be good just with our 2K defenders. If they attack into them, we flip up a Robin, deprive them a little bit of card advantage. So that can be nice. So I think it's a good inclusion. But let's see how the second game goes. I think the first game did actually show Big Eye being somewhat useful, as, you know, it did enable us to... Oh, let me hide their hand. As it did enable us to sort of look into our deck and potentially avoid some bad cards later on. We didn't actually get to do that because our opponent was able to pop off before we reached that point. But in a more standard game, I think it would have been very useful. And we do draw Big Eye in the opener here, so that could be pretty good for later. Unfortunately, we do draw 2 Thunder Dragons, which is kind of unfortunate. We don't really want that. So we are just going to discard 1, add another to hand. And kind of unfortunate we don't get 2 from deck, but that just is what it is. We're going to set the Big Eye, set a Woboku pass back to our opponent. They're going to set 2 pass back to us. And we draw another piece, which is pretty nice. We could just leave things as they are here, but I think we might want to see what's in our deck a bit and then tribute over a Big Eye for the Thunder Dragon. So we are just going to flip up the Big Eye. Let's see what we get here on the top 5. They're going to trap hole. That's fine. We've got the last will. And this is kind of actually awkward with the last will, because if we last will, then this top 5 cards of our deck will get shuffled into the deck. So I think that makes sense for our opponent to trap hole there, as, you know, we can't really last will if we want to preserve some form of combo here. This is a great 5 cards, though. We've got Sangan, Reborn, Will, Solemn, Swords. This is just insanely good. I think, honestly, we should stack Reborn, Sangan, and then the other 3 on the bottom. We get a search off the Sangan. That will shuffle up our deck. We do have Last Will for the Sangan, but that represents, like, 4 searches. Actually, 5 searches, because we get the first search off Sangan, Reborn the Sangan, Last Will out another Recruiter, and that's just the end of the game. So I think we should do that. We're not really at risk of dying anytime soon, so I think we're fine. We also have the Woboku set there. So if we stack Reborn, Sangan, and then just anything else, we should just win the game. Unfortunately, I forget that Sangan will shuffle up the deck. So what we do is we just stack the Sword Solemn, stack the Will, and then we stack the Reborn, and then we stack the Sangan. I think this actually will potentially cost us the game here. If we had stacked Reborn Sangan, we would have been perfectly fine. But as is, we just don't, and that's very unfortunate. They will Pot of Greed, and they'll draw 2, summon out Mass Sorcerer, and they'll attack in for 900 here. That's perfectly fine. They'll get to draw a card. That's also fine. Set 1, pass back to us. We draw Sangan, and again, we forget that Sangan will cause us to search and shuffle up the deck, so we do just set it. I think we honestly should have summoned it, just to attack into Mass Sorcerer. If they had Trap Hole, then, we would have had to search our deck anyways and shuffle it up. But as is, we are basically guaranteed to shuffle up the deck at this point, so not worth it. Also, if that's a Solemn, then they can Solemn our Uboku, so we should have kept this in hand. But we don't. We make a big mistake here. They're going to bring out a Lodgin, and they're just going to attack into the Sangan. Again, I think we should Uboku this since we have committed it, but we don't consider that, and we will search, and we will lose the Reborn on top. So we don't have basically the guaranteed game plan here. If that was a Solemn, it wouldn't be guaranteed anyways, so, maybe it wasn't guaranteed, but it would have been much better than what we did. And, this kind of speaks to Big Eye being a bit difficult to play. It does take a fair amount of skill to play Big Eye well, and a fair amount of practice too, and this is my first game playing with it, so I don't have that quite under my belt. But I think given that the combo was there to potentially just go for game very quickly, I think that does show that Big Eye can really increase the ceiling of this deck. Dark Hole is a pretty great draw here. We'll save it for later, though. We do have the Uboku for one more, protection of our life points if they do commit more to board, and then we can Dark Hole it all away afterwards. We do have to discard a Thunder Dragon for turn. We had 7 cards in hand, so nothing we can really do about that. They're going to bring out a Lodgin, try and attack in with everything. We are going to Uboku, but they do have the Solemn, so this would have potentially stopped our big sort of combo to get all the pieces, but I think it would have been fine because it wouldn't have been able to stop the Uboku later. So, a bit of a trade-off, but I think we would have been still in a very good place with the better combo play that I laid out in talking about this video. But they will get in a ton of damage here, dropping us down to 1700. We're at a very, very precarious position. They're going to set 1, pass back to us. We are just going to try Dark Holding this, and that does succeed, which is very nice. We'll set the Giant Soldier, set a Last Will as a bluff, pass back to them. Next turn, we can potentially get out another Recruiter from deck with the Last Will Thunder Dragon. They're going to flip up a Giant Soldier. Very worrying here. If they've got a Fisher and another Lodgin or 7-colored fish, then we are just dead in the water. Luckily, it looks like they're just setting 1, passing back to us. We draw Trap Hole, which isn't the best, but we are just going to go for the Last Will play anyways. Just getting another Recruiter from deck, and also still walling up with the Thunder Dragon. We do have a Trap Hole for any beaters that they might have, so we're feeling good about that, and we do have 3 pieces in hand, so all we need is another Recruiter after this, and we will potentially win. They are going to flip up Magician of Faith, though, grab back Pot of Greed, and they're just getting a ton of advantage here, so this could complicate things quite a bit. They are going to Dark Hole the board away, and this makes us extremely worried. We will add an Exodia from deck to hand, and they're going to Heavy Storm, which means that it is likely just the end of the game here. Yep, they've got Reborn, so that will be the end of the game. But again, I hope that this game showed how Big Eye can, I think, improve the power level of Exodia. If I had played this a bit better, I think this game could have gone very differently. So I do think that this is a testament to how Big Eye can improve the deck, even though we still lost. But that was the Exodia Mirror match, which will not be the typical matchup for this deck. So let's dive into another game that faces a more standard sort of aggro deck. We've got a game against Duck Pace Pill, very active duels in the format, very good duels in the format. Always fun to have them on the channel. And we, of course, are playing the Exodia Big Eye variant. Unclear what they're playing yet, but let's see. We are going to go for rock and win the rock, paper, scissors. Hopefully that luck continues into the game. And we will draw first. This is a very good hand. We have the Giant Soldier of Stone and the Uboku and a Trap Hole now. So we're feeling very good about this. We'll just set the Giant Soldier of Stone, set the Trap Hole, pass back to them. The reason we don't set the Uboku here is that the only thing we're really worried about is like Jiraigumo if they're playing that. So we want to play around that a little bit if they've got it. They're just going to bring out a 7-colored fish, which is an indication they might be on Jiraigumo, since people only really play 7-colored fish if they're going all in on beatdown. They're going to attack into our Giant Soldier. They will take 200 from that, and they're going to set another pass back to us. We draw Change of Heart, which could be very nice for later. Right now, though, we're just going to set a Waboku pass back to them. If they do have the Heavy Storm set, then this is a very good bait on their part. We do get a bit punished here, but we can chain the Waboku to get some value out of that at least. Not the best, but not the worst either. They are going to bring out Jiraigumo, and we will be able to trap hole that, which is very nice. Our Giant Soldier Stone will still survive. And we are going to discard a Thunder Dragon to get 2 Thunder Dragons to hand. This will pair very well with our Change of Heart later, potentially. But as for now, I don't really feel the need to do anything about that. They're going to Pot of Greed. This could be kind of worrying for us, but they're going to bring out another Jiraigumo. Kind of unfortunate. They're going to attack in here. We could actually Waboku this because we do have a way to remove the Jiraigumo next turn, and it looks like we will. So they're going to call heads. Maybe they'll lose half their life points here. They do. That does potentially open them up to losing through damage this game. So maybe it will. Unclear, though. We draw Big Eye, which is very nice. We're just going to Change of Heart the Jiraigumo. We feel no need to attack with this and potentially cut our life points down by half. So we're just going to set a Thunder Dragon, set a Solemn, pass back to them. They're going to attack in with the 7-colored, set 1, pass back to us. We draw a Witch, which is very nice. We can search out another piece with that. So we're just going to do that. We're setting it, passing back to them. And let's see what they do here. They're going to attack in with 7-colored Fish. We will get a search. We're going to grab a piece. I think that's their first indication that we're on Exodia. So now they can maybe play more aggressively here if they so wish, which would be kind of unfortunate. But we're going to set the Big Eye, hope that they don't have Raigeki. And it looks like they have Dark Hole, so they've got another way to clear it. We're debating here about whether we want to actually use the Solemn, drop down to 4,000. Whether the seeing 5 cards on top of our deck is really worth it or not. I think that it's not worth Solomon here, as they can likely push for some damage here, but it's unlikely that they'll be able to deal 4,000. So I feel like it's better just to take the damage, as we'll be taking less through that than with Solemn. We will lose out on the Big Eye activation, but we've got Reborn for Recruiter, we've got Swords to Stall, we've got plenty of options here, so we're not too worried about that. And they are going to Reborn out a monster here. Looks like they're going for the Fish, so they don't want to cut their life points down even more, which makes sense. And they're going to bring out a Mass Sorcerer as well. Attack in for 2,700, and we will take that. They'll be able to draw a card. They'll set 1 pass back to us. We draw another Sword, which is very nice. We are going to Reborn here, targeting the Witch. And we are just going to bring it out in attack and try and clear that Mass Sorcerer. We can then activate Swords afterwards, which would be pretty nice. So I'm feeling pretty good about this until they say Damage Step and activate Reinforcements, which, you know, is a very, very neat tech. And this shows one of the reasons why it's so neat. We will lose our Witch here, and they will get a draw off the Mass Sorcerer. Maybe this is us just getting too greedy here. Maybe if we had brought out the Witch in defense or activated Swords, it would have turned out better. But we did get uber punished there, and we will be able to search a piece, but I'm feeling a lot worse about this turn now. In phase 2, we're just going to activate Swords. If they've got Heavy, we could just Solemn it. We might not want to, though, just in case their last card is like a counter trap. It could just kill us out of nowhere. They're just going to set 1, switch Mask to Defense, set another, pass back to us. We draw Fisher, which could be nice to clear the mask later, but I don't think we need it yet. They're going to set another pass back to us. We draw Sangan, which is very good. We've got 3 pieces in hand. That's a Recruiter. All we need is the 4th Recruiter, and then we'll basically win the game. They're going to Magician of Faith for a Pot of Greed. Unfortunate, but it is what it is. They will be able to add that Pot of Greed to hand, activate the Pot of Greed, draw 2 deeper. So they're just getting a ton of cards from their deck. They'll set another pass back to us. We draw Raigeki, which is not that bad. We could use it. It looks like we are going to use it. There's an argument here for just activating the Swords, seeing what they've got, and then just not doing the Raigeki if they've got weak monsters on the field. But weak monsters can add up, and I don't think we want that much aggressive pressure. Also, we do have a Fisher in hand for when they bring out another beater later. So we will just clear the entire field away. They will be able to get 2 searches here off the Sangan and Witch. Kind of unfortunate, but nothing we can really do about that. We know that they've got a Reborn Engrave, so honestly, we're just fine leaving the game state as is. We don't feel the need to Swords yet. They could just Raigeki our board away, which would be very unfortunate. So maybe we are playing a bit too conservatively here. But it looks like they've just got a Lodgin. And, oh, they are going to fire the Raigeki. That's a bit worrying. But honestly, they can't kill us here. And if they activate like a Robin Goblin, then we do have the Solemn for that. Not necessarily what we want to Solemn, but we will survive that attack at least. And they're just going to end their turn. Feels very good. We've got a Mirror Force, which is pretty nice. We're just going to Fisher away their Lodgin, activate Swords, and pass back to them. And let's see what they do here. They're going to set one, pass back to us. We draw Dark Hole, and honestly, we might want a Dark Hole just in case it's a Faith. We do know that they added one to hand with their Sangan. So we are just going to Dark Hole it and pass back to them. They're going to heavy, and this is a big think on our part. So we know that they've used up Reborn. We don't have any monsters on field for them to change of heart. But if they do have a counter trap and we activate Solemn, then we are just a game shot away if they've got an 1800 beater, which is very likely. So I think what we have to do here is just let this go. It's really unfortunate, but I think we have to do it. Turns out they didn't have a counter trap. So maybe we should have just gone for the Solemn, but I think this was the safer option. We do have the Mirror Force for next turn as well, so we're not too concerned about it. They're going to attack in with the Lodgin. We will take that, and they're going to set one pass back to us. Magician of Faith is extremely good. With that Magician of Faith, we can get back Reborn to get back a Recruiter and potentially win the game. So we're going to set the Faith, set a Mirror Force, pass back to them. And turns out they do have another Heavy. So that will actually be the end of the game if they've got another monster here. And it turns out that they do. So that is game one. And we came really close to winning that one, but we didn't quite make it. Big Eye didn't quite help that game, but it was there. Did Beta Raigeki, I guess. So Mask of Darkness would have done the same thing. So I was fine with its performance that game. For game two, we do see that they're on Jiraigumo. And we don't really have a way to out-aggro this aggro deck. So what we're actually going to do in game two, we're going to side out some of our 2K defenders, as Jiraigumo can just get over those. Side in some Fishers and Magician of the Faith, and keep it on the Exodia strat. Hopefully they have the read in game two that we're siding out of Exodia, and they don't play some discard cards. But in talking to them during siding, they revealed that they do have main deck card destruction for this matchup, which I think is quite smart, and I think it's something you'll see a lot more of going forward if you do play Exodia. But hopefully they side out of it in game two. Hopefully we can pull off the Exodia win, because this is a pretty rough matchup for us here. We draw a good opener, though, which Thunder Dragon, Last Will, Swords, Faith. This is actually really crazy. It's very good. We are going to discard the Thunder Dragon, get 2 Thunder Dragons from deck to hand, and then no reason to do anything except for set the Witch. Set a Solemn. This is heavy bait more than it is actually something that we want to do first turn, but good to have on field. They're going to bring out a Jiraigumo and just attack into our set. Hopefully they call the coin toss wrong. Let's see here. And looks like they do call it right. They do call heads. So they will attack over, which we will get to search out an Exodia piece. They're going to set one and pass back to us. So they do know that we are still on Exodia here. The cat's out of the bag right away, but we kind of had to do that. And the Sangan's very nice. We're just going to set the Sangan. We could potentially activate Swords here, but it looks like we're just going to pass. We're not too afraid of damage that an extra beat stick can do to us. We can activate Swords afterwards. They're just going to attack into our Sangan, call heads, and let's see if they get it right. They do get it right, 2 in a row, so they will preserve their life points still. We'll just get another piece to hand. And main phase 2, they're just going to pass back to us. Pot of Greed's really good, especially since we do have the Magician of Faith in hand to get it back. And we draw a Recruiter, so we could just go for that. And it looks like we are going to go for that. We're going to set the other Solemn. If they do have Heavy here, this is a very unfortunate Heavy for us, but at least that Heavy's out of the way for when we activate Swords. So not the worst. Oh, it looks like we're going to activate Swords now. Oh, that makes sense. We're at 7 cards in hand, so yeah, we got to get rid of this somehow. If they've got the Heavy, we can feel fine Solomon, because if they've got a counter trap, we've got another Solemn. So yeah, this all makes sense. We're just going to Swords, pass back to them. And they're just going to set one pass back to us. Big Eye is a good draw for later. We're going to Tribute set over the Witch and potentially get a another recruiter out. We will be able to do that. We'll get a Sangan, and this is very good. We've got 3 pieces in hand, another piece on field basically, and we can just pass back to them. That's turn 2 on swords. Fisher is nice to get rid of the Gumo. We might want to do that, but it looks like we're saving off on it. I think actually we should have fired the Fisher there. No reason not to. They're just going to set 1 pass back to us. And we draw the 4th piece, so that is just the end of the game. If we didn't, then we could have flipped up the Faith for a Pot of Greed, or to get back the swords. We could have fissured the Jirai Gumo. You know, there's plenty of stuff we could have done. But since we have that 4th piece, we are just going to set over the Sangan, get a piece. And that's the end of the game. Sometimes that's just how Exodia games go. Even in games 2 and 3 of a game with them. And, you know, that's something that you gotta be willing to do sometimes. Yes, the general tendency is to side out of Exodia, and I think that is generally good. But if you have the read that your side deck will not match up to what your opponent's doing in games 2 and 3, it's perfectly reasonable to keep in Exodia. Yes, your opponent may have sided in some card destructions for it, but they don't always draw the card destructions, as you saw in game 1. And sometimes you just gotta take the risk. Sometimes Exodia can outpace the opponent in getting the pieces to hand, and you know, you just got to go for that. So game 3, we are actually going to go for it again. Like, we kind of just, we're kind of hoping that they will have the read that we're not going to play Exodia game 3, because we played it the first 2 games, so clearly they're going to side into something against it. But it is likely that they will have something against it here. So very unfortunate. Let's just hope we can manage to pull this out. It's definitely one of the deck's worst matchups. So, and this hand is not the best. We do have 2 pieces right away, which is nice, but we don't really have any way to protect ourselves or get more. So, very unfortunate. That is a way to protect ourselves, but if they've got the Gumos, then won't do much. They're going to flip up the Faith, grab back a Pot of Greed here, which is very nice. They're going to activate Pot of Greed. Draw 2. This is very worrying for us, because if they do draw into card destruction early, we've got 2 pieces in hand, and that's very bad. They're going to bring out a 7-card fish, attack into our giant soldier here. They'll take 2. They're set 1, pass back to us. We draw another Fisher, and we could just Fisher their whole board away. We could also switch giant soldier to attack into Magician of Faith, Fisher away their 7-card fish, but that does leave our giant soldier a bit more vulnerable. We don't necessarily want to do that, so we're just going to pass back to our opponent. They are going to bring out Gumo, very unfortunate. Switch Magician of Faith to defense, pass or attack in with Gumo, and they're going to call Tails here. And we've got to decide whether we want to Woboku this or not. If we do Woboku it, we can switch giant soldier to attack next turn, attack into Faith, double Fisher their board away. It is kind of worrying in case they have another monster to attack over Giant Soldier later. And we'll be out of pretty much all defensive options at that point. If we don't use the Woboku and we draw a monster, we can pull off that play as well. But it is kind of risky, because we might not draw a monster, or a monster that we want to use. Like if we draw another Exodia piece, then that would be really bad. We do have the Woboku for that turn, though, if that does happen, though. So might be worth doing anyways, and we are just going to let that go through. Let's see if they have to pay half their life. Looks like they will, so we are perfectly fine with that. They're down to 3,900. We may potentially have to deal damage to them to kill them. Just good to have the option on the table. We do luckily draw a monster, and oh boy, what a monster. That is a really good one. We're going to bring out Sangan. If they did have Trap Hole or something, we could just last without another recruiter, and we'd be basically scot-free with a ton of pieces in hand. Looks like they don't have the Trap Hole or a Mirror Force, though, so we're just going to be able to walk over that Magician of Faith, double Fisher their board away, and pass back to them. They're going to Tremendous Fire here, so that is a worrying sign. And they will heavy. We do have a Woboku, though, so that's somewhat nice. They're going to set 1, summon out 7-colored, pass back to us. And, you know, we're going to think about this, but I think, honestly, what we want to do is just switch Sangan to defense, set the Trap Hole, pass back to them. We could attack into the 7-card fish, lost without a recruiter, but I think that's a bit greedy. I mean, I guess it looks like that is what we're going to do, though. I guess we're trying to play against if they draw card destruction. So we're trying to end the game as quickly as possible. We will take 800, bring out a Witch, search out a piece, and then just set the Trap Hole, pass back to them. and hope that this enables us to get the pieces to hand soon enough to win. We're just going to trap hole that Lodge in because we're running pretty low on life. So unfortunately, they do have a card destruction, so we will lose 3 pieces here. And this is a really bad turn of events, as we don't really have many other good ways to win. Raigeki, though, is a great draw. We can Raigeki their board away, attack in with the Witch. We've got Last Will to bring out more monsters if we need them. We've got Solemn to prevent any big plays on their part. So, honestly, I'm feeling pretty good about this. We're just going to Witch, get back a Witch here. No reason not to, which is probably the best search we still have in the deck if we're starting to go aggressive. They've got Trap Hole the Witch, we get another monster to hand, so we got to do it. And we draw Change of Heart, which is insanely good here. We can make a huge damage push. We will Change of Heart their 7-colored fish. If they've got Mirror Force, they kind of have to use it here. And if they've got Waboku, they've also got to use it here. So we're just going to attack in, and they're going to take it all, which means that they very likely don't have Waboku. Very good sign for us. And we'll just go to main 2, set a Solemn, set a Raigeki in case they've got another card destruction. If they want to heavy their board away, they can go ahead because they've got 3 back row, and that will probably be very bad for them. They're just going to attack into the Witch, though. That's perfectly fine by us. We will just search out a Sangan for next turn. We can Raigeki away their board, summon out Sangan. If they've got the Trap Hole, Last Will out another monster. So we're feeling good about this. They're just going to set 1 pass back to us. Pot of Greed is pretty great, you know, just insurance, I guess, here. We're going to draw 2. We draw the head and a Waboku, so we're just going to go for it. We're going to Raigeki, summon out the head, and they reveal that they've got nothing here to stop us. So we did manage to win with the head of Exodia, just not the way that we expected. But that does show that the deck can adapt in cases like this. You know, just because you lose your Exodia pieces, no reason to concede. There is still worlds where you win. We did get pretty lucky with what we drew off the card destruction. But I mean, luck does happen. So never concede until the bitter end. But those are the games I've got for you today. The game that we actually won, Big Eye didn't really come up, which may be a bit damning against it. But I think if we had played the game where Big Eye did come up a little bit better, I think we could have potentially won or been in a much better position. And so I do think that Big Eye does help the deck a lot. Also, it's nice just having a monster that you can set without having to have previous graveyard setup. As, you know, I have run into games where you draw the masks too early and you don't want to commit them to board because you have no traps in graveyard. So they can be very underwhelming in the wrong situations. Big Eye is something that you can play early game, late game, and mid game and be pretty much fine. But let me know what you think of my tech. Do you have any other changes that you'd make to Exodia? Do you think that Mask of Darkness definitely deserves to be here? Do you think that the side deck is now more improved with the Muka Mukas and Ramen Goblin over the 7-colored fishes and White Magical Hat? Let me know all your opinions down in the comments below. And let me know especially about what you think of the face cam. If reactions are positive, I'll definitely keep it in the future. If y'all don't want it, I'll take it out. But until next time, I've been Ben from YGO from Zero, and I'm signing off.